My name is Kayla Stolte, and this is my PowerPoint presentation on capital punishment. My thesis will be going over how capital punishment is an ethical resource in criminal justice because it holds the proper offenders fully accountable for the choices that they make that intentionally destroy innocent lives. The history of capital punishment originates from Briton influence, which was first introduced to America. The first recorded execution in the new colonies was Captain George Kendall in the Jamestown colony of Virginia. He was executed on account for being a spy for Spain. The laws during this time in America were different for each colony, so each colony had its own law for capital punishment. Caesar Borgia was an influential figure at this time who spoke out against the death penalty as well. In 1974, Pennsylvania repealed its death penalty for all offenses except first-degree murder. So essentially, you would not be put up to the death penalty unless you were charged with first-degree murder at that time. In the early 19th century, many states reduced capital crimes and built penitentiaries to try to reduce the death penalty. In 1834, Pennsylvania was the first state to move executions away from the public eye and to carry them out in correctional facilities. So instead of doing a public hanging or shooting, they would essentially do it in a private area where no one could watch or view the death penalty being carried out. In 1864, Michigan became the first state to abolish the death penalty for all crimes except treason. In 1838, some states passed laws against mandatory death sentencing, instead enacting discretionary death penalty statutes. In 1924, the use of cyanide gas was introduced, so they started to progress in the ways of how punishments would be carried out through the death penalty. Today, in our modern age society, a total of 27 out of 50 states still use the death penalty. Today, we have other forms of the death penalty, such as lethal injection, the electric chair, and much more. There were many influential court cases as well that played a huge factor in the death penalty in our society today. One of the biggest court cases was the Fruman versus Georgia court case in 1972. It was determined through the court case that, quote, the death penalty is unconstitutional under the Eighth Amendment. Prohibition against cruel and unusual punishment when it is imposed arbitrarily and randomly, which leads to discrimination. This decision halted the capital punishment temporarily, and later down the road through Gregg versus Georgia in 1976, it was brought back to the attention of the government, and it was concluded through Gregg versus Georgia that, quote, to summarize, the court determined the penalty for death was deliberate murder and is not per se cruel or unusual, but it is mandatory death statutes, leaving the jury or trial no discretion to consider the individual or defendant his crime or cruel or unusual. So essentially, the overall court case was in terms of the defendant trying to find more humane and ethical ways to carry out the death penalty so that the human rights of the defendant would not be overlooked. Finally, another court case that was really important was Roper versus Simmons, which was concerned with the overall ruling that it is unconstitutional to conduct the death penalty to anyone who is under the age of 18 at the time of crime. So it prevents minors from being put to death for the crimes that they are committed, due to this being a violation of the Eighth Amendment for an American citizen. In reference to the 5 purposes of sentencing to capital punishment, the death penalty through my thesis would be seen through retribution, being an eye for an eye. They killed the innocent, so their killer should then be killed. Through that, then we move into incapacitation, which would essentially cover, the goal would be remove the criminal from life so they can never commit a crime again. Seen in deterrence, the death penalty creates a sense of fear or intimidation so that other criminals would not want to commit another crime or just as heinous of a crime as this criminal. Restoration, the goal would be to the victims in a sense that they would be getting the proper justice for the crimes committed against them. Rehabilitation, the final one, death row inmates, this would kind of more relate to them in the sense of finding reconciliation, whether it be devoting their life to God or just finding forgiveness or peace and closure in the crimes they committed before they are put to death. Looking into the ethics approach through my thesis, utilitarianism would kind of see things as the death penalty removes evil people from the world. It creates more peaceful community and creates a better environment for everyone. So it poses a potential safer future for our community. Deontology would kind of essentially go into the act of killing the criminal who commits such an evil act against society would ethically be okay considering the consequences. So killing the criminal would be seen as justified because of who they were as the criminal. Finally, ethical egoism would be seen as the death penalty helping the criminal justice system by making space in prisons, as well as helping the criminal justice system look efficient, essentially making the CJ system look like they are doing their job and providing justice for the community to help the community feel safer. To wrap things up, I'm going to conclude that my thesis of the capital punishment is an ethical resource in criminal justice because it holds proper offenders accountable for the choices that intentionally destroy innocent lives holds. I think capital punishment does what it's supposed to do, and that it is ethical on the sense of if it is used properly and against the right criminals, that it does create a safer society and a better safer community for everybody.